So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lisa Apolinski. I am the Marketing Manager here at NewSchool of Architecture and Design, and I would like to welcome you joining our webinar today on your funding options. So hopefully you know a little bit about our institution. We prepare students to bring their vision to the world in terms of architecture, digital media arts, landscape architecture, and construction management. I like to consider us as design with an edge. We are located in the downtown area of San Diego. We use our urban setting to our advantage as a living laboratory, and we encourage our students to not only do collaboration within their cohorts and their studios, but we do collaboration across all of our programs, which helps enhance your education and really prepare you for the career that you are going to be pursuing once you graduate from our institution. So today we'll be discussing several options that are available to help you fund your education. The most important thing you'll be doing probably in your lifetime is deciding where you'll be going to school to prepare you for your career. And the second would be how you're going to fund it. And while we do have some institutional specific information in this webinar is really to help you understand how to go about doing financial aid, whether you come to our institution or you attend another institution of your choice. So we really want to make this webinar an ability to figure out what funding is available to you and to learn about the variety of financial aid options and how you would apply for that assistance. We'll also be exploring scholarships and underfunding programs such as military benefits and employer reimbursement. We will be taking several question breaks throughout the session. As Mike has alluded to, there's a QA section on the top of your live meeting. All of you are muted, but you'll be able to ask me specific questions. Again, my name is Lisa, so if you send me your question via the QA IM box, I'll be able to write that down, and we will be pausing throughout the presentation to reviewing any questions that you might have. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our Director of Financial Aid, Mike Nelson, who will give a little background on himself and start the presentation.
Hello everyone, I'm Mike Nelson, Director of Financial Aid at the NewSchool of Architecture and Design. I'm glad you're attending today. As Lisa said, going to college is one of the most important decisions you can make in your life, and figuring out how to fund it is right there at number 2. Because if you can't fund college, it's kind of difficult to go. I've been the director here at the NewSchool of Architecture and Design for 2 years, and prior to that I've held different positions throughout higher education in financial aid for 5 years prior. Thank you once again for everyone attending. To start off, I just want to say that we're going to be talking about today financial aid in general, the financial aid options. For your financial aid options, it's very important to understand that everyone's situation is different. Once you decide on a school you'd like to attend, you begin the admissions process, whether it's at NewSchool or somewhere else. Then you will work with that school's financial aid department to find out your option. And it's very important that as part of your process to get ready for college, you include making sure you're working with that financial aid office, your financial aid counselor, to get everything in order. So with that, looking at your screen, we're going to start talking about the different types of financial aid. One of the most common misconceptions about financial aid is that financial aid means free money only, referring to grants and scholarships. The truth of the matter is that financial aid as a whole contains 3 general components. It includes loans, whether that's from the Department of Education as a federal loan, or whether from a private bank as a private student loan. It includes grants, which are money that does not need repayment based on the financial need of the student, or scholarships, which are money that does not need repayment but is based on the merit, whatever the criteria is for a specific scholarship, of the student who applies. So quickly, let's take a look at loans. Okay, like I said, loans require repayment, and they do accrue interest, and there are multiple kinds, and we'll get into the details of all of these. From federal sources, we have what are called direct loans, subsidized and unsubsidized, graduate plus loans if you're a graduate student, direct parent plus loans if you're an undergraduate student, and then private loans, like I said, from a private bank. Grants or scholarships, which require no repayment. There's some specific ones we'll talk about today. We're going to talk about the federal Pell Grant. It's a very common one from the Department of Education. If you're a resident of California and you plan on attending a school located in California, most likely that school will have access to the state of California Cal Grant. A lot of schools have their own aid as well, and NewSchool is no exception. And we have many different kinds of grants and scholarships available to students who attend NewSchool specifically. And lastly, there's a smaller grant from the federal government that many people aren't aware of. It's called the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. And we're going to speak about that as well. Please remember, if I'm going through a slide and you have any questions, just don't hesitate in the middle of whatever I'm saying. Go to the Q&A section at the top left-hand corner of your screen. It's a drop-down. Just like an instant message, send a message to Lisa, and we'll make sure to answer all of your questions at the appropriate time. Okay, so moving on, we're going to look at federal direct loans for undergraduate students only. If you're a graduate student on the line, keep listening because most of this applies to you as well. The first thing we're going to want to take a look at is what are Stafford loans, okay? Stafford loans are loans from the Department of Education. They are not based on credit. They are guaranteed by the government. Though, of course, there are criteria to apply. And they're divided into two types. There's subsidized Stafford loans, and there's unsubsidized Stafford loans. The main difference between the subsidized loans and the unsubsidized loans is that subsidized loans are awarded based on financial need. And for all federal aid, that comes from the FAFSA. We'll talk about the FAFSA in a bit. If you do not meet the need requirement for subsidized loans, or possibly you want to borrow more than the limit placed on subsidized loans by the Department of Education, you can borrow what's called an unsubsidized loan. Another key difference between the two types of loans is how you are charged interest. Both types of loans will accrue interest. However, with the subsidized loans, you are not charged interest, and it does not accrue while you're enrolled as a student at an institution of higher education. The government is subsidizing that interest. However, the interest on an unsubsidized loan is charged and begins accruing as soon as the funds are available to you. In other words, as you start attending school, when those unsubsidized funds are dispersed to the school to help pay for your tuition, each date that funds disperse, each term usually, that's when the interest will accrue on just that amount. One way to minimize the total cost of interest is to pay it as it accumulates throughout the time you're in school, if you choose to. That's an option. It's not required. Now, please note that both these types of loans, Stafford, subsidized and unsubsidized, require you to begin repayment 6 months after graduation, or if you choose to withdraw from the school, or perhaps you decide to take less than what's considered half-time unit at that institution. For example, at the New School of Architecture and Design, half-time is considered 6 units. So if you were attending here and getting these loans and you decided to take 5 units or less, you would be required to start repaying those loans. Interest subsidies for subsidized loans have been eliminated beginning this July 1st, 2012, per Congress's change to the Higher Education Act. Direct subsidized loans will not be eligible for an interest subsidy during the 6-month grace period either. You know, every year the Congress has to decide how they want to change the way financial aid works, and what I just said simply means that if you've been getting Stafford loans before or you had known about them, that every July 1st Congress may change the way the rules work. And this July 1st, they changed the way an interest charge is made to the student when they originate a new loan. And that interest rebate, meaning that the government would reimburse you for it, has been eliminated. So in fact, according to the government, you get slightly less money back than you would have a few years prior. But like I said, for more questions, if you have those questions, please just type it in the Q&A section, Or if you're working with the school or plan on working with the school, those are definitely questions you want to bring up to your financial aid counselor. Now, looking at some information on the screen, you're going to notice on the left-hand side, there are subsidized loans like we talked about. They're need-based. The interest rate, beginning for all subsidized loans starting July 1st, 2012 or later, is 3.4%. It's a fixed rate. It will not change. You'll see below that, there's a range of amounts. Now, remember, subsidized loans as well as unsubsidized loans don't require a credit check. So instead of a credit check, the government places an annual limit, a school year limit, on how much you can get. Now, that range, there's a lot of factors that go into deciding where you fall in that range. That's why it's important to work closely with your financial aid advisor at the school you're attending. Moving to the middle column, unsubsidized loans. That is fixed at 6.8% now. You see that interest rate is significantly higher, and that's because the students who take out these loans either choose to, even though they have the need for subsidized loans, or based on their families or personal financial situation, the government says you may only have these unsubsidized loans where interest accrues while you're in school. And it's just based on that. The government feels based on their criteria, you may not have the need. You'll notice the limit, the annual maximum there is $2,000 to $12,500. Once again, that's going to be determined what your yearly amount maximum is on a lot of factors. And that's why, like I said, it's so important to work with your financial aid office. Now you'll notice below that you'll see an independent total limit and a dependent total limit. Without getting into too much detail, because we could be on here for hours, is that when you fill out the FAFSA, based on whether you're an undergraduate student, graduate student, and then what your personal situation is, you're married, you're not married, you're in the military, you have kids, those are just a few of the situations. You may be considered independent of your parents for financial purposes as a student, or you may be considered dependent. Your school's going to help you with that when you fill out the FAFSA, but please note the difference in limits. When you're dependent, you have a much lesser lifetime subsidized and unsubsidized Stafford loan limit called the combined limit of $31,000. When you become independent, that limit increases to $57,500. Now, I just bring that up. It's something that you may never encounter as a student. A lot of students never hit that limit, but just please be aware it's there. Now, looking over at the Federal Direct Parent Plus loans, the Plus loans are meant for only undergraduate students. The loan is designed for the parent to take out the loan for the student when other aid, like Stafford subsidized loans, don't adequately cover the costs of the school you're attending, or there needs to be extra funding for educationally related costs like rent, books and supplies, transportation, these sort of things. Now, this loan is credit-based, however, it's still issued by the Department of Education for the student, but the parent's the borrower. And the interest rate is higher at 7.9%. Okay, what we're going to do now is take a look at federal direct loans for graduate students. And you're going to see there's a couple differences here. First, a lot of the information I said previously about how Stafford loans work still applies to graduate students. But here's the biggest difference. The biggest difference, as you can see on the left-hand side of your screen, is there are no subsidized Stafford loans for graduate students. Beginning July 1st, 2012, Congress decided that graduate students would no longer have access to the subsidized portion of the Stafford loan program. So if you're a graduate student and you got those previously as an undergraduate, or even as a graduate student if you're transferring schools, or maybe continuing on your education in a different degree program, you'll no longer be able to get the subsidized Stafford loan. With that said, if you use Stafford loans, unsubsidized loans will be your option. It's the same interest rate as undergraduates at 6.8%. It's fixed. There's no credit check for it. You'll also notice below the percentage, the annual maximum has increased to $20,500. And by annual, we mean school year. Another change that you'll see is below the annual maximum, you'll see a total limit. This is the lifetime limit, and it is a combined limit for graduate students of $138,500. Now, this includes anything you borrow out as an undergraduate student. So if you borrow for your undergraduate degree a total of, let's say, $50,000 in Stafford loans. well then what you have available for Stafford loans to the graduate student will be $138,500 minus $50,000. So if I do my mental math, you'll have $88,500 available to you. Now you'll notice that there's something called a Federal Direct Graduate Plus loan as well. That works very similarly to the Parent Plus loan I just talked about. You can see it's the same interest rate. You can see it's fixed. It is still issued by the Department of Education. But instead of the parent taking it out for the undergraduate student, this Graduate Plus loan is taken out by the graduate student himself or herself for themselves to help pay for tuition or other educationally related expenses. It does require good credit, and it's something that your school is going to help you apply for. All the loans I just talked about, whether the Graduate Plus, Parent Plus, or Stafford subsidized loans, have to be applied for through your school. You can never apply for and receive these loans separate from attending an institution of higher learning that's approved by the Department of Education for financial aid, or specifically what this is called Title IV funding. So what that means is, why are you getting these loans? Why are you getting this money? You're getting this money because you're choosing to go to school and you're electing to get help financially from the Department of Education. Okay, we're going to take a look at federal and state grants now. Now this is a kind of a simplification of what happens with federal and state grants. If you're not from California, I just want to start off with the California state grant. You have to be a resident to receive it. Additionally, if you remain a resident of another state but you decide to attend whether California or a state different than your residency, please check with your state's Education Commission or Education Office to understand how your state's state-level funding works. A lot of states will allow students to receive, let's say, the state of Indiana's funding in Oregon, but that's up for the state to decide. And many states say if you're not attending inside the state, you don't have access to state funding. And that's true with California. If you're a California resident and you decide to go to Alaska, you will not be eligible for the Cal Grant. So please make sure to also check with your state office about how that's going to work if you're going to attend outside of your state of residence. Okay, so we just talked about the Cal Grant. Let's begin there. The California State Grant, it is a grant by name, but in actuality it combines two types of criteria. There's the grant criteria, which is you still use the FAFSA that we'll get into in a bit for the California State Grant. And it's going to look at your family and personal need based on income, members of household, et cetera, et cetera. However, the California grant is what's considered a competitive grant. And what that means is, as part of the application process for the Cal Grant, they're also going to take a look at your GPA, whether it's your high school GPA if you're coming straight out of high school, or whether you're transferring college, and they're going to look at your prior college GPA. And the way the state of California works is they take all these factors into account, they give you, the student, a score, and they rank you against all of the other applicants in the state of California. And based on their budget for that year, which is always fall, winter, and spring of the coming year, so the upcoming Cal Grant is going to be the 12-13 fall, winter, and spring. They're just going to say who are the top X number of students. Those students get their awards, notified to the school, notified to the student, and everyone else doesn't make it that year. So you can always choose to reapply every year. Now, speaking quickly about the California State Grant in terms of specifics, if you did not fill out your 2012-2013 FAFSA by March 2nd of 2012, this prior March 2nd, then you are ineligible for the Cal Grant for the upcoming year in fall, winter, and spring. And that's true every year. The deadline is always March 2nd. So make sure to put that on your calendar if you didn't take care of it this year, or if it turns out you didn't receive the Cal Grant, to get all the documentation you need in by March 2nd of the coming year. This also includes what's called a GPA verification, because like I said, your GPA, your scholastic aptitude, is equally as important as your need for determining whether or not you get the Cal Grant. And once again, if you're attending a California school, please talk to your financial aid office about that. They'll be able to help you with the specifics. Okay, speaking about the Pell Grant. The Pell Grant is the main need-based grant given out by the Federal Department of Education. It's determined on a number of factors you submit through your FAFSA. I keep saying FAFSA. We'll get to that in a second, but that's the application that you need to fill out every school year you plan on attending. Even if you're not sure you're going to use financial aid, you need to make sure you've submitted successfully that FAFSA. The current one we're using right now is the 2012-2013 FAFSA. Now, the Pell Grant is only for undergraduate students, and it's only for undergraduate students who have yet to earn a bachelor's degree. If you're deciding to go on and get a second bachelor's degree, then you are automatically ineligible for the Pell Grant. For the 2012-2013 year, the Pell Grant's maximum is $5,550. But depending on the outcome of your FAFSA, you may not get the maximum. You may get something in between nothing, $0, and the $5,550 maximum. One thing to keep in mind, like I said, every year Congress gets to decide if they want to change the rules for financial aid. And this year, in addition to the changes they made to Stafford loans, they also made some changes to the Pell Grant. The new change is very important for students who are continuing their education, who may be switching programs or switching schools. They put a new lifetime limit on the Pell Grant. It essentially is equivalent to if you get the maximum Pell Grant you're eligible for 6 consecutive years, whether that's 12 semesters or whether that's 18 quarters. When you hit that maximum, then even though you may still be an undergraduate student, you may not have earned your bachelor's degree, even if your FAFSA says you're a needy student, if you reach that 600% maximum, then the federal government says that you've run out of Pell. So here, let me just, because it's new in the law, this will be affecting any student everywhere in the United States, wherever you go. Let me break it down for you really quick. So, as I said, once you receive 600%, 12 semesters or 18 quarters of 100% Pell Grant, you're going to be excluded. So let me give you an example. So let's say your maximum Pell Grant award for a prior year, the 2011-12 school year, was $5,550. But you only received $2,775 of that. Okay, that's half. So in the 11-12 year, you would have used 50% of your maximum award. Okay, and that's, you used 50% of your 600% of your eligibility. Let's say this coming year, in the 12-13 year, you only use 75% of your eligibility. So you could have gotten $5,550 again in 12-13, but instead, you only use 75% of it. So that means 50% in one year, 75% in the next year. You've used a total of 125% of your 600% lifetime limit. Now, once again, this is why it's so important to work with your financial aid office. They receive reports, and they track every year what you're using in this percentage. And they'll make sure to stop you from receiving the Pell Grant, whether in full or in part, once you start approaching that 600%. But as I said, this is why it's so important to work with your financial aid office. Lastly, I want to talk about the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. Now, it says federal, so this comes from the Department of Education. And you have the opportunity to get this grant along with your Pell Grant. Now, not all schools participate in this kind of grant program, and every school has a limited amount of funding. So it's going to be up to the institution you attend to decide how much you get and what the criteria is if you earn that. So, for example, at NewSchool, if you're an undergraduate who's eligible for a Pell Grant, we offer $750 per school year, or $250 per quarter for the 3 quarters in our school year, in addition to what you may receive for the Pell Grant. And this grant is designed to be given not only to students who are Pell eligible, but the neediest of the neediest students, to give them that little extra boost. Once again, this is something that will be automatically added to your award at NewSchool when you come here if you're eligible, and it's definitely something to ask about at any school you choose to attend to see if they have that. Okay, so now let's move on and let's talk about how do you apply for financial aid. This is when we start talking about the FAFSA, which stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It's very, 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 very important to fill out the FAFSA once you complete your taxes and once you complete your parents' taxes or your parents' finish everything up in the beginning of every year. The new FAFSA becomes available January 1st of every year. Right now, the only one available is the 2012-2013. So if you haven't filled it out, just fill it out. If you're not attending college right away, if maybe you're a senior and you're not going to start till the fall 2013, that's okay. Get in there, fill it out. And what it's also going to do is give you a great idea of where you stand with financial aid, what you're eligible for. And so that way you and your family can start planning ahead of time about what it will look like when it is time to fill out the FAFSA that will give you aid when you start school. Now the FAFSA is going to be used to determine whether or not you get the Pell Grant and how much, the FSEOG or Federal Educational Opportunity Grant. It's also used by the state of California to determine whether or not you get the Cal Grant. It's also going to be used to help determine whether or not you get Stafford loans and what are the amounts. Are they subsidized? Are they unsubsidized? Additionally, this document helps the Department of Education determine whether or not you're eligible at all for any aid. A lot of people don't realize this, but the FAFSA actually, the information you put in is run through the IRS, the Social Security Administration, the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Immigration, and they check many, many different things to make sure that you're a person who has the privilege of getting financial aid. And most people do, so don't be scared about what I said. And it's nothing that you're going to see. This just happens all in the background. But be aware that the FAFSA is a very, very important document. Without it, there is basically no financial aid for you. It's important to remember that the schools you plan on attending cannot access the information you put in the FAFSA until you put in their school code. Now, every school has a different school code. Whatever school you plan on attending, you think I'm planning on attending, I highly recommend entering that school code in the FAFSA during the application process. NewSchool's code, as you can see on the screen, is 030-439-00. That's on our website. Every school will have that on their website. But if you don't put that in, a school can't see your aid, they can't give you aid, they can't talk about your aid. You have to give schools permission to view this. So once again, if you're filling out the FAFSA, just put in every school you think you might apply for. That way your information is already at the school when you pick who you're going to be admitted to. Lastly, remember when you're filling out the FAFSA, you're going to be using your taxes from the prior year. So for example, with the 12-13 FAFSA, the one that we're using right now, the 12-13 FAFSA covers July 1st, 2012 to June 30th, 2013. And that one-year period of time applies to every FAFSA moving forward. That's why you always hear them when financial aid officers talk about the FAFSA, they say the 11-12 FAFSA, the 12-13 FAFSA, the 13-14 FAFSA, etc. And the FAFSA that we're using now always uses last year's taxes. So the 12-13 FAFSA uses taxes you and your parents completed in 2011. And it's very important. You have to have your taxes done in almost all cases in order for the FAFSA to be accepted and for you to receive financial aid. So you want to have your taxes done and have a copy in front of you when you fill out the FAFSA. When you go through that, and we're not going to do a FAFSA tutorial today, but you will notice that in the current 12-13 FAFSA, there's something called an IRS data retrieval tool. This is a very, very helpful tool. We recommend all students use it. It's going to streamline the process for putting in your tax information. In fact, what it's going to do is it's going to connect to the IRS database, pull in your taxes, and auto-populate all of those fields for you. Believe me, it's a big help because otherwise you have to go line by line through your taxes and enter in the requested information. So I highly recommend it. Additionally, should there be extra steps down the line after filling out your FAFSA, using the data retrieval tool may in fact eliminate them because you didn't enter in the data. The Department of Education knows the data came directly from the IRS. So keep that in mind. And once again, make sure to work with the school you're going to attend. They can help you if you have problems with the FAFSA. So let's talk about an overview of how financial aid works. Specifically, we're going to refer to NewSchool. I can't speak about how the process for financial aid at other campuses, but I can speak to how it works at NewSchool. Like I said, the first step is always filling out your FAFSA. Whether or not you know you're going to attend school in the FAFSA year you're filling out, just please fill it out. You'll get to see the results, And when you start attending, the FAFSA is already at the school you're planning on attending. The next thing is, once you figure out your program, you have an idea of where you want to go, when you want to start, how many units you want to take. You don't have to know specifically, but it's good to have this information, because the next step in number 2 is you want to meet with your financial aid coordinator or counselor at the institution you're going to attend. Now, what I can speak about with NewSchool is that, we are a small private design college. So we have a staff here that has the capacity to work hand in hand with you and your family to make sure you can get the financial aid you're eligible for. That means one-on-one attention. That means people who will respond quickly to your emails, your phone calls, staff who have regular office hours. You can come in and sit down, whether it's you, your family. We even had dogs come in because the family brought their dog. So we're very student-friendly, student-centric, and we give personal service here because we want you to be financially successful as well as academically successful. So number 2, like I said, once you have some information about when you're starting and what program, and you have your FAFSA done, the perfect time, don't wait, talk to your financial aid counselor coordinator at your college. Number 3, like I said, they're going to help you complete all the paperwork. Some students have more, some students have less, but we're always going to show you the next steps, as should any financial aid office at the school you attend, about how to be eligible, how to get your financial aid. Now, once you complete all the paperwork, like I said, whether at NewSchool or another school, you need to be aware, just like you're aware of when your midterms are, what books you need, where are your classes, you need to be aware of how does my financial aid work during the school year? What are the funding amounts I'm getting? When did they come in? How do they pay my student account? If I'm getting extra money back to help me with educationally related expenses like books and supplies, how do I get that? When does it come? These are all important questions that you don't want to just set aside because, in my experience, when students set that aside, it's when they run into problems down the line. So in part 4, the way it works is once you get all your financial aid taken care of, dates of disbursement connected to the different terms in your school year will be set up for when that aid comes to the school. By law, whether it's federal grants, federal loans, private loans, they will almost always come to the school first. The reason being is that this aid is being given for you to go to school, and the government and private banks want to make sure that tuition and fees are paid so you can keep coming to school. Now, with that said, at NewSchool, usually financial aid disbursements complete, meaning are fully dispersed, 2 weeks after the start of the term. So it is possible here, depending on the student situation, to have them dispersed earlier. But that is the question. Definitely you want to ask to your institution you're attending or to your financial aid coordinator at NewSchool when you have been admitted and start putting your financial aid together. And number 5, like I said, the last step is if you have a credit balance, meaning if you've received more total aid than the charges to the school for tuition and fees for the term, then that extra money is given back to you in the form of a check 14 days after the date of disbursement. And once again, this is what students refer to as a refund check or a stipend check that they use to pay for things like rent, books and supplies, medical expenses, transportation, those expenses that they're going to incur that are related to their education, related to living while in school.
Okay, we haven't received any questions yet, but Mike, I have a question.
Sure.
So it sounds like for the FAFSA, fill it out early. There's really no earliest time to fill it out. As soon as you can is better. And for the school code, go for broke. Is that a safe assumption?
Thanks, Lisa, for clarifying that. There's absolutely no penalty for filling out the FAFSA early. There's no penalty for putting in as many school codes as the FAFSA application will allow you. Now, the one thing I will say about that is don't just fill out the FAFSA flippantly. Don't think, I don't know what I made last year, but I'm just going to throw in some numbers. Because believe me, if you are intentionally not accurate on the FAFSA, you will probably get stopped along the way in your application process because there will be a number of errors. While the FAFSA document is they try to make it very simple from a student perspective, like I said, behind the scenes of the FAFSA application, a lot of things are going on. So I highly recommend filling out the FAFSA as soon as you can. Don't be afraid that you're going to fill it out wrong, but make sure you're taking the steps to have your taxes done, have your taxes available when you fill it out. because we want to make sure that as you continue the financial aid process, it's as smooth as possible. Looks like we don't have any more questions, so we're going to keep on trucking. So now we're going to talk about our new school specific scholarships and grants. One of the biggest questions you want to ask the schools you're applying for are, what aid does the school itself offer its students? It's going to be different for every school. The deadlines, the types, the requirements, everything's going to be different. But what I want to do is take a little time to speak about what's offered at NewSchool. You know, NewSchool is committed to the success of their students. So that's why you can see on your screen there's 8 different types of awards you may be able to apply for. And one thing I'm going to say overall, whether it's about NewSchool specific aid or whether it's about, you know, private scholarships and grants in general, is the students who apply for these and the students who continue to apply for these are the students who get them. That's the only difference between someone who receives scholarships and grants and those who don't. The students who apply for them and keep applying whether or not they get them one year are the ones who get them. So many times in my career I see students and I see awards that weren't given. Students didn't apply, money wasn't used. Why? It's just because no one made the effort. So please, 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 please make the effort to look for and apply for scholarships and grants. So looking at the first one, we have the ACE Mentor Program. Now the ACE Mentor Program is not just NewSchool specific, it's actually a nationwide organization that partners with high schools to help educate students on construction, architecture, and design. As part of the ACE Mentor Program, colleges can choose to participate, and then they provide scholarships. So the ACE Mentor Program, NewSchool, is very, very active in the San Diego chapter. In fact, we give tens of thousands of dollars out a year to students entering construction management as well as architecture programs. This helps fund computers for high school students, tuition scholarships for college students coming to NewSchool. So if you're in high school right now, and find out if you have an ACE Mentor Program at your school and get involved. Because if you're not involved at the high school level, you cannot get the college level scholarships. Next, let's talk about the NewSchool Merit Scholarship. Now, as it says merit. So this scholarship is based on your previous GPA when you come to NewSchool, whether that's your high school cumulative GPA or whether that is your prior college GPA. It's an automatic thing. So the financial aid department is going to look at your GPA from admissions once all your prior transcripts are in, and we're going to give it to you or not. It's not something that requires you to do any extra paperwork. The next is the NewSchool Grant. Difference from the Merit Scholarship is that it's based on need. Depending on the outcome of your FAFSA, the final score that you get from the FAFSA, we're going to give you this grant automatically. So if you don't receive it, it means your FAFSA score was too high, you didn't have enough need. If you get it, it means you were within the range to be eligible. Another scholarship that students don't take advantage of is the Alumni Legacy Scholarship. This scholarship is pretty straightforward. If you have a colleague who's graduated from NewSchool, a friend who's graduated from NewSchool, if you know and can speak to an alumni of the New School of Architecture and Design, get them to write a letter of recommendation for you. There is a one-page application you have to fill out here for the Alumni Legacy Scholarship. That's additional money. That's I think of above $1,000 for that scholarship, and something a lot of students don't pick up on. And that's a great example of free money that's out there. You just have to make a little bit of effort to get it. Now, the major scholarship at NewSchool is our Presidential Scholarship. That scholarship is anywhere from $1,000 a year to $12,000 per year for a student who's attending NewSchool. Now, the Presidential Scholarship, because it's such a large amount, is a rigorous application process. You're going to have minimum GPA requirements. You're going to have to fill out an application. You will have essays to write, and you will need to submit a portfolio of your work. Now, the great thing about the Presidential Scholarship is it's renewable. If you get it 1 year, you can reapply and get it again the next year. Now, obviously, amounts vary year to year if a student continues through the program because it's based on their continued work and they're compared to all the other students who apply. But I can tell you, we have students who get this every year because their work is of high quality, they maintain good grades, and above anything else, they keep applying. Now we also have some department-specific scholarships at NewSchool. They're for construction management, landscape architecture, and digital media arts. In addition to architecture here, there is that design component. And while this presentation is not on those departments, you can see that we have other degrees, other areas of specialty you may want to have in your education if architecture is not the right fit for you. So if you are looking at NewSchool, I do encourage you to ask about those degrees and those departments. Should you choose those degrees, if those are right for you, there are department-specific scholarships for construction management, landscape architecture, and digital media arts. I highly recommend if you're coming to NewSchool, you're looking at those departments, talk to enrollment, talk to admissions, talk to those department chairs to ask about how those scholarships work. What are the deadlines? How do I apply? What are the amounts? Because if you don't ask, if you don't apply, you can't get the money. And at the bottom of the screen, we have the link to our school website where you can see all the details about all the scholarships and grants I just spoke about. If you don't want to copy and paste that, just simply go to newschoolarch.edu and look for the tab that says Tuition and Financial Aid and Scholarships. Now, I did mention at the beginning of the scholarship and grant talk, speak about other sources of funding. You know, the 8 grants and scholarships I showed you at NewSchool are just ours. There are literally thousands of grants and scholarships available in the United States. The biggest question is, are you taking the time on a continuous basis to research and apply for them? Now, I'll be honest with you. When we conduct, scholarship seminars here at NewSchool on a quarterly basis, we conduct scholarship essay writing workshops with our writing faculty on a quarterly basis. And once again, the difference between the students who get them and the students who don't, the students who get scholarships and grants apply and they keep applying. So what I recommend to all students is just like you have a quarterly or semester schedule for buying your books, getting to class, for midterms, for projects, and finals, put in your calendar on a weekly, if not several week basis, researching scholarships. That means going to your financial aid office, asking for a scholarship list. I'm going to be honest, no financial aid office has a comprehensive list of all the scholarships and grants in the United States. That's why it's important to learn how to research. Ask, how can I find more scholarships? And you'll see on this slide, there are some big scholarship websites out there, collegeanswer.com, finaid.org, fastweb.com, collegeboard.com, gocollege.com. The key is to doing well at getting scholarships and grants is be specific. Do you belong to a church? Do they have scholarships? Lions Club, Rotary Club, 4-H Club. Who are you as a student? I like to talk about my friend in undergraduate. She was actually a Japanese citizen. She wasn't even a U.S. citizen. She was in Orange County going to community college. She's a woman, she's Japanese, and she's in the United States. She found out there's a Japanese-American Women's Society in Orange County, California. She's a woman, she's Japanese, and she's in America going to school. She applied and she got $2,000. That was it. That was it. She wrote an essay, she filled out an application, here's a $2,000 check. It can be that straightforward, but why was she successful? If she didn't do that once, she did it every quarter she attended college while in the United States. And that's another point. If you're listening or you know of anybody who is here on a visa or may not be a U.S. citizen, usually private scholarships and grants don't have that requirement. It's very rare, actually, that I see a private scholarship or grant have a requirement like U.S. citizenship. That requirement is usually, and almost always reserved, actually, for federal and state grants. Let's talk briefly about another funding source called private loans. Private loans, as I kind of alluded to briefly in a previous slide, are loans, kind of like the Stafford loans, except they're coming from a private bank. Now, the biggest difference with private student loans is that they're not connected to the government. Government doesn't issue them. They're given out by a bank. So the bank has the freedom to put any number of rules regarding the criteria to qualify for these loans. Usually they will include credit checks, income verification, and the interest rate and amount that the bank gives you is based on those things. So we always tell students private loans should be the last choice because they're going to be more expensive, the interest rate's going to be higher. And another thing about private loans versus government loans is that private loans have very strict repayment terms. And for example, government loans, as I alluded to briefly, you don't have to pay back anything while you're in school, attending at least half time. And when you are able to graduate and start repaying your loans, there's a myriad of different options that are designed to help you, the student, make repayment. Private loans have very limited options. So when you're putting together your financial aid package at the school you're going to attend, please keep in mind that private loans may definitely help you, and we have students who use them here at NewSchool, but they should be last on your checklist when all other options have been exhausted. Other options you should think about. Are you working while you're going to school? Many employers will help pay for your tuition. They may ask you to pay for it first. That's called employer tuition reimbursement. Or they may pay up front, but never hesitate to ask, what are the education benefits that my employer offers? And don't think because you're a part-time employee, don't think because you work for In-N-Out Burger or anywhere that somebody won't help you. Ask your manager, talk to your supervisor, go to HR. If you don't ask, you're not going to get it, regardless if it's there. There's been plenty of times in my career when I've worked with students who had wonderful benefits from their employer to help them go to school, in some cases for free. But because they didn't ask, because they didn't look, they didn't know. And they ended up paying for school when, in fact, it could have been totally free for them. So don't forget to talk to your employer. Next, let's talk briefly about military and veteran benefits. I'm not sure if anyone here on the call is a current active member, a veteran, or is a spouse or child of a veteran. But believe me, if you can get veterans benefits, you want to use them. Now, as you see on the screen, there's a lot of different options, and I could spend an entire hour just talking about these. But briefly, there's some options for you. If you're a veteran, meaning you've retired from the military, there's the Montgomery GI Bill. The newer version is the post-9/11 GI Bill. There's also Veterans Affairs Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment. And additionally, as a program connected to the GI Bill, there's the Yellow Ribbon Enhancement Program. Now, if you're an active military member, there are programs that can assist you as well. You definitely want to talk to your education officer on the base where you're stationed to see if you're eligible for something called tuition assistance. You're also going to look at if tuition assistance is not enough money to cover the cost of your school, if you can do something called a top-up program. But once again, if you are a veteran and you're on the line, just send your question to Lisa through the Q&A tab, and we'll answer that at the end. But also, these are great things to ask the financial aid office where you're attending, how do I sign up for veterans benefits? How do I make sure I can take advantage of my benefits? Very important if you have these, that you should use them. Okay, so we're coming towards the end of the informational part of this webinar. So let's sum everything up. First and foremost, apply for your FAFSA early. Make sure you have a good idea of where you're going to school, when you want to start, and start working with your financial aid department as soon as you can. Ask questions, make financial aid as much of an important part of your education as your academics. Because if you can't pay for school, guessing you probably may not be going. Remember, federal financial aid consists of federal direct loans, whether they're subsidized and unsubsidized Stafford loans, or Parent Plus or Graduate Plus loans. They consist of grants, such as the Pell Grant or the Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant. There may be other grants as well from your state. Don't forget to apply for those. And make sure when you are applying with the FAFSA or the free application for federal student aid that you enter in as many school codes as you possibly can to make sure that the school you plan on attending has your information. Remember to always think about other funding sources. As I said previously, many students only look to the federal government. They only look to their state for aid. Have you looked at your school's own aid, their grants and scholarships, like I talked about with NewSchool scholarships and grants? Begin researching and learning how to research for and apply for private grants and scholarships. You need to consider a private loan for your tuition from a private bank. If you're working, ask your employer, can they help out with your education? And especially if you're an active member of the military or a veteran, make sure to get your benefits, whatever they might be.
Okay, so we got a couple of questions. One question was asking They're a dependent of a veteran, and they get a fee waiver. And is there something they could use to assist them as being a dependent?
That's a good question. As I said in the beginning of the presentation, every student situation is different. And I'm glad that I'm not sure who asked that question, but as a dependent of a veteran, you're looking into those benefits. I know one of the biggest things that I see with dependents of veterans is your mother or father, or if you're a spouse of a veteran, has the veteran, your mother or father or your spouse, transferred the benefit to you. Because if that's not transferred, if they haven't relinquished their right to the benefit, then regardless of where you go, you can't get it. Another thing you want to look into is every school you plan on attending, can you get that benefit there? At NewSchool, we have just about every veteran and active military option available to us. Some schools, however, will choose to, within their own institution, not connected to the Veterans Affairs Office, not connected to active military branches, waive fees and tuition for active military members or veterans. At the New School of Architecture and Design, right now we don't waive any fees for veterans or tuition, though we do have plenty of policies, especially for active members concerning leave of absence that involves deployment.
Okay, and then Christopher asked two questions. First one he asked about is work-study options.
I'm glad you brought up work-study, Christopher. That was one of the other federal options that I alluded to in the beginning. Federal work-study is federal financial aid. You have to fill out the FAFSA, and you have to qualify. There are certain income limits and what's called EFC limits, or the expected family contribution. That's the result of your FAFSA that you have to fall into in order to get federal work-study. Federal work-study may not be offered at every school, so it's something, as you're asking about now, you want to ask at other schools, because it's separate from all other types of federal aid. The way it works is you do all the paperwork you have to do for your financial aid. You begin when you're first completing your financial aid to include that in there. Ask, how do I apply? What do I do? At NewSchool, once you get all of your regular financial aid paperwork done, there's another set of paperwork for federal work-study. At NewSchool, we have on-campus as well as off-campus positions. Most students work on campus because it's, of course, much more convenient. They're here. And each department on campus may have a work-study position or multiple work-study positions. The biggest thing is that department hiring, and do they want you? As part of federal work-study, it's not a guarantee you can get it just because you would like a position. If the positions are filled, or if, for example, we have a materials lab where there's laser cutting and 3D printing, and where students come to do all of their models and projects. There's actually that's the department that has the most work-study positions. Obviously, that department requires a lot of skills. There's hazards. You have to be training other people, and if the manager there decides, we would like you, but we have another applicant who's also available for work-study who has a much greater skill set, it's that manager's right to choose the person they know is going to fit best. So in general, just like all your other financial aid, ask questions. Start early with federal work-study, so when that opportunity becomes available for you, you can jump on it.
Okay, and then Christopher also asked about local housing that our institution is associated with, and if you want, I can briefly talk to that. So Christopher, we're a commuter campus, but because we're based in downtown San Diego, we have a lot of housing options available around us. If you are looking to start in the fall, we have a closed Facebook page. If you send me your email, I'll make sure that you're invited into it, and we are posting classifieds, and the students share with one another, hey, I'm looking for a roommate. You can also go into Craigslist. There are several options that are available to you that way. We don't have a housing structure, a formal structure, but because we're in the urban area, there are quite a bit of choices that you'd be able to look into.
What I can say as well to follow up on Lisa's, hundreds of new students start a new school every year, and everyone goes through the same process to find housing, and all the students are successful. So even though, as Lisa pointed out, we don't have our own on-campus housing, and right now we don't have any formal relationship with the housing provider. Students constantly find appropriate housing, even right down the street from campus.
Okay. Next question is from Jennifer. What is the annual maximum amount for the federal Grad Plus loan?
Good question. There is no limit. That's why it wasn't on there. The way Graduate Plus loans work is, remember that they are issued by the federal government from the Department of Education, just like Stafford loans. However, they do conduct a credit check on graduate students who apply for the Plus loan. And that's the biggest difference. Instead of the government, for Stafford loans, just saying flat out, no credit check, we're going to guarantee it, but there's limits. For Graduate Plus loans, as long as your credit check passes, obviously you're going to school, you're meeting all of the other requirements that get you financial aid. There is no lifetime or yearly limit imposed by the government. The only possible limit that I may say is every student who gets financial aid has what's called a cost of attendance budget. And I'll speak about it quickly because it can get pretty complicated. It's going to depend on your situation. But this budget includes not only the costs that the school's charging, such as tuition and fees, but it's going to include estimates for indirect costs, things that you, the student, will be paying for outside of school, like rent, food, books and supplies, transportation, medical, that create this total budget. And it's that total budget that every school is required to have for every student that will be your total cap per year, whether it's Stafford loans, grants, Graduate Plus loans. And when students run into a maximum using the Graduate Plus loan, it's usually because they're taking every dollar possible they can that year, and they hit that cap. For NewSchool, it's about $45,000 for this large cap. Now, that is not tuition and fees by any means. That's just our cost of, about the cost of attendance for students. But it doesn't mean that's what students pay.
Okay, and then we have another question. What is the biggest difference for availability of financial aid for graduate students? And I don't know, Rachel, if you meant graduate versus undergrad, or just what's the biggest change in the financial aid for graduate students? I don't know if you want to answer it both ways.
It's a good point, Lisa. I'll answer it both ways. Speaking about the difference between undergraduates and graduates, the biggest difference is graduate students don't get grants or scholarships from the U.S. Department of Education as well as the state of California. And I believe that's usually true for most states as well. And that's simply because the government believes that as a graduate student, you've already attained a bachelor's degree and you can go out and have a higher earning potential, so you are not as needy. That's the logic, not my logic, it's their logic, but it's the system we work in. Outside of federal and state grants, there's no difference. I mean, graduate scholarships and grants through private, nonprofit organizations are just as aplenty as undergraduate. For the changes in graduate aid from the federal government, they've been, obviously excluding the Pell Grant, for loans, for Stafford loans, have been very similar. First, last year, graduate students could get subsidized and unsubsidized Stafford loans. This year, beginning July 1st, 2012, graduate students can only get unsubsidized Stafford loans. That means whatever Stafford loans you get from the government this year, and probably for many years moving forward, interest will accrue while you're in school. You don't have to make payments on the interest or, for the loan as a whole. However, interest will accrue. The government won't subsidize the interest anymore. Another difference that it will be very important to ask your financial aid counselor once you're putting together your aid, and if you choose to use unsubsidized loans from the Department of Education or Graduate Plus loans, is to look at what's called the interest rebate. Now, what that means is, let's say you take out, you're a graduate student, you decide to take out and qualify for $20,500 in unsubsidized Stafford loan funding for your school year. So let's say at NewSchool, it's fall, winter, and spring you're attending, that $20,500 is going to be paid out during the duration of your fall, winter, and spring term. Now, will $20,500 by the end of spring be what's been dispersed to help pay for your tuition and fees? No. The reason is that $20,500 is the maximum gross amount. The Department of Education has something called an origination fee. And that changes year to year. But in the past, what they've done is this little fee. So it comes out to like $19,500 and something is what you actually get dispersed to your account from the Department of Education. Now, in prior years, they've given a rebate. So whatever that little interest fee was, they actually gave most of it back to you. But beginning in July 1st, 2012, that's changed. So in fact, you may be getting more or less money back than you would have in previous years, depending on the change in the regulations about how these loans are awarded. This is something that's totally explained here at NewSchool and at most other schools when you apply for financial aid. So when you speak with your financial aid counselor here at NewSchool, my generalized answers will be very, very specific for your situation, down to the dollar. So that's why it's really important to work with your financial aid counselor as soon as you know when you're going to start school and what program, so you can get these specific questions answered and in writing.
Great, and I don't think there's any other questions. So we want to move to the next slide. So I'm going to quickly do my marketing spiel. If you have not already researched us or thought about applying to our school, I encourage you to do so. You can visit us at www.newschoolarc.edu. You can see information on there about our programs, about events, about things that are happening on our campus, as well as doing your online application. And more importantly, if we move to the next slide, I will encourage you to become a follower of us either on Twitter or on Facebook. We have a lot of things that are happening this next academic year, including our lecture series, which is going to be on the website very soon. I will give you a hint. We will have a big lecturer in the spring of 2013. And whether or not you attend our institution, we obviously would give precedence for seating for our students and our faculty, but our lectures and our workshops are open to the public. They always are. So if you are looking to, learn outside the classroom, that is something that we tout at NewSchool, and with our lecture series and our workshops and other very exciting things that are coming, I highly encourage you to follow us. There's a lot of activity happening here. We're growing, and we have a lot of very cool stuff that's going to be coming down the pipe. And with that, I thank you for joining us today on this financial aid webinar. I hope that you find this information helpful and that it will help you to learn about your options and how you invest in yourself in the future. And hopefully we will see you on the NewSchool campus. Thank you again for attending, and have a great day.